Started. Good morning and thank you for joining us. I'm Amanda Nelson, Long-Term Services and Supports Manager with the Office of Aging and Disability Services. I'm joined today by several of my colleagues who will introduce themselves while we get through some basic housekeeping. If you haven't already, you're welcome to put your name, role, and the facility you represent into the chat. Today's call is designed to support nursing facility leaders to better understand your first nursing facility scorecard. If you have other questions related to QuEST or VBP, and if we have time, we can cover some of those questions too. Any questions we can't get to today, we will follow up with you directly after today's call. This meeting is being recorded and will be distributed to all QuEST members by email. If you don't already receive the QuEST updates, you can sign up for those by emailing oads.nfquality@maine.gov. And Chelsea will drop that email into the chat as well in case you missed it. Please submit any questions you have for today through the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen. So that we don't miss any of your questions, please avoid entering them into the chat, but Chelsea will be watching for those as well, just in case. I'd like to now turn it over to Brooke McNaughton to introduce herself and Kathy McGuire. So Kathy, do you want to go first?
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. Catherine McGuire, and I'm working as a consultant with the Office of Maine Care Services and Office of Adults with Disability and Aging. Retired from the University of Southern Maine at the Muskie School, and I've worked in this area for a long, long time, so welcome.
And hi, everyone. My name is Brooke McNaughton. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Maine Care Quality Manager, and I've been working with OADS on this nursing facility value-based purchasing project for a little over a year. And I'm going to go ahead and take it away at this point. So we are here today to talk about the scorecards. You should have already received your scorecard. If you haven't, this is a good time to check in internally with your facility and see who's receiving it. And I also think it might be a good idea to have it open as we walk through them today. And if you don't have it, that's okay. We'll be able to refer back to the recording. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty, the more granular pieces of the scorecards, I wanted to frame this by almost what it is not. So what this is not is a large overview of the whole QuEST program. It's not a review of how payment is connected or how monies are connected to quality measures. It's an office hours. It's pretty informal. It's dedicated to helping you navigate this scorecard that tells you how your facility is doing on the quality measures that will eventually impact payment. And that includes everything like the time frames, the data source, the benchmarks, even the rationale. And again, as an office hour, it's pretty informal. We don't have any formal PowerPoints. We're going to be walking through, sharing screens, unsharing screens, and then walking through questions that we received through our inbox. And if you're not already familiar, I'd love to have someone, Chelsea, could you drop the email that we use to receive our questions and all correspondence related to the QuEST program? We already received a few questions and we're going to be orienting the office hours around those. And when you do have questions in the future, this is where you go. That is your bread and butter for asking questions and figuring out information is using that email. So we'll be walking through those questions. And then, like I said, I do recommend having your report handy if you're able. But if not, that's okay. We can still walk through it. It will still make sense. Ask questions as we go. And like Amanda said, use the Q&A function. It might get lost in the chat. And then finally, future sessions will reiterate this information. So this might just be your first exposure. It's okay to need a couple exposures to fully understand what's going on. But we will also do future sessions with things like Core Q and the connection to payment and any changes to the scorecard based on your feedback. And that's an important piece that I do want to call out because we do want your feedback. That is part of the purpose of these office hours, not only to give you information, but so you can give us information. What's working, what's not. This really is a tool meant to inform and aid you on your quest to better care and the payment that coincides with it. And then just a note about meaningful feedback is if you have a clear idea, that is a little bit more helpful than just a plain criticism. But, you know, we will work with whatever you give us. So let's dive in. So the scorecard. The purpose of the scorecard is that we give it to you quarterly, so you get it every 3 months. It tells you how your facility is doing on the measures that are selected to be a part of this nursing facility value-based purchasing QuEST program. And if value-based purchasing is kind of a new term or phrase for you, think about it in like the value over volume. So we're connecting the value of care, the quality of care to your payment rather than just the volume of care that is being delivered. And so how we're assessing that is through quality measures. So we went through a whole process deciding what are the quality measures, what's meaningful for us. And after finally deciding which ones are going to be a part of the program, what's meaningful for you, what's meaningful for the patients, the residents, we were able to develop this scorecard. So it's supposed to give you your information on a quarterly basis. Something that was really important to us is that the information on the scorecard is in alignment with what you see as a facility on Care Compare. We don't want it to be something where you have to go digging around and finding different information from different payers, from different sources. So that is one big piece of it. And then another big piece is, so Kathy had introduced herself, we're partnering with the Cutler Institute. They have a lot of experience with nursing facilities and Care Compare and CMS, and they are producing these scorecards on behalf of OMS and ODES and to produce them for you. So I wanted to give you all of those pieces, front end them, and of course we can go back if none of that made sense, feel free to ask about it. What I'm going to do at this point is open up an example scorecard. I did take this from one of the facilities and then just anonymized it. However, all of the information is publicly available. So this is all publicly available data sources. So let me share my screen just one moment. Okay, so when you first open your scorecard, this is what you're going to see. It's going to open up to the second of 2 tabs. Now, I know that when some people have opened it, they don't see this first tab. You just have to toggle the little caret on the left to get it over. But everyone will have 2 tabs at the bottom. That's what I want to first draw your attention to. And it automatically opens up to this Q1 2025 scorecard. Let's talk about the nomenclature. So Q1 2025 refers to calendar year Q1. So the first 3 months is Q1, January, February, March. The idea being that you receive this at the end of that quarter. So the scorecard corresponds with the calendar year period of time that you receive it. But some of you may be wondering, well, what about the period of time that the performance was assessed? We're actually going to refer to that and go directly to the next tab. So we have your scorecard tab here. It talks about the measure that you are looking at, the benchmarks, which will eventually have to do with payment, and also your performance. We'll get into this a little bit more detailed in just a moment, but let's go to the measure index, this other tab. So just scrolling through, hopefully it's big enough for all of you to see. Scrolling through, there's a lot of information, but it's a lot of really valuable information. And once you get oriented, I think it's going to make a lot of sense. So we're going to spend some time here and then dive back into the scorecard tab itself. Before I do this, I do want to pause. I'm seeing some things come in through chat. I just want to make sure, are there any questions before we get started? Okay, great. Please do interrupt me if that changes. Okay, so we're on the measure index. Again, if you open it up, just see the one tab, you have to toggle over, you'll find the index. This is a really valuable piece of information. It's kind of what anchors you to all the information you need to really understand the scorecard without having to review an entire hour-long webinar or office hours or send an email, wait for something back. This is your first stop shop and one-stop shop at trying to figure out what is the information I need to understand this. This first line data source, it's not hyperlinked, you will have to copy paste, but when you follow it, it takes you to the data that is the source data for both Care Compare and then subsequently for us. So we use the exact same data that is displayed on Care Compare during the same time period. So this is the piece where if you're saying, you know what I see on my scorecard doesn't necessarily match what I'm seeing on my end of things, your first step is to check this data, make sure that this is what you're saying that is right. Data upload date. I'm going to stop sharing so I can go to the next screen. I do apologize, I am on one screen today. Makes it a little bit more challenging, but I think it's going to share the whole thing. It takes you to this site. So when you go to the link on the scorecard, right, data source, when you go to this link, this is where it takes you. And you'll see that you have a bunch of dates on the left side, kind of like a column. The date that corresponds with the scorecard, the data that is pulled for the scorecard is written right here in cell A3. So you know the data source and the data upload date if you want to double check and make sure that there are no mistakes. We have a pretty thorough QA process, but you know, nothing is too, I guess, I would encourage you to check into it and make sure that everything makes sense to you and everything corresponds on your end too. So this is the data source. This is the files that we used to populate your scorecard. Okay, so we've made sense of this part. So now we have the table for the measure name and what all the different measures are. We've had previous webinars that talk about the different measures that we use and why. This one's more about just understanding this scorecard, right? So we have the total nursing staff turnover, the measure definition, and what we did include is which nursing roles are included in that. We thought that would be helpful as that was a common question. And then also a where to learn more. So this link will take you to the actual measure specifications. Before we get to column C and D, I'm going to go through the other measure names. So we have the percent of residents who received antipsychotic medication, the measure definition, where to learn more, percent of residents with a UTI, definition, where to learn more, and then core Q. That's going to be a subject of a future webinar and a future office hours. This one's coming soon, right? This is not something that you're required to have right now, but this will be included in the future, so we want a placeholder. Keep it fresh in your mind. And then as a general where to learn more, for more information on anything, we have our SharePoint. This one is hyperlinked. We recommend going and checking it out if you haven't already. And it's also where you can find another reference to the email if you need to send an email off to be like, hey, I have a question about something in particular or something I want you to address in a future office hour. Okay. So we know where the data comes from. We know how to figure out which file it is. We know which measures you're looking at, what they mean, how to find their specifications. So let's talk about what columns C and D are. Now, this can be where it gets a little bit confusing for some folks. And again, this can be just a first exposure. Feel free to come back to this. Feel free to spend some time and then reach out if you want a little bit more help understanding this. But it is important to know, what is your data telling you? Where is it coming from? So the performance, I apologize, frog in my throat. The performance data period refers to the period of time where the measures were assessed. So for total nursing staff turnover in this scorecard that was sent in Q1 2025, again, Q1 2025 refers to the period of time where you received your calendar year, period of time that you received the scorecard. The performance data that corresponds with Q1 2025 is 7/1/23 to 6/30/24, and that's for total nursing staff turnover. Pausing there, letting it sink in. I know that that's a lot of different dates coming in one ear and maybe out the other, but what corresponds with this scorecard is this performance data, date period. Now, something that I'd want to draw your attention to is that the measurement periods for all the measures aren't exactly the same. We do have data periods for the two MDS measures, the antipsychotic medication and the UTI measure. These ones do have the same period of time, 10/1/23 to 9/30/24. That's what's reflected in the scorecard for Q1 2025. The reason being is that this is what is the most up-to-date version of the data as of this data upload date, 2/26/25, where we found this data, what we started with. I know not so people don't have their cameras on, but this would be a period of time where I would check in and be like, does that make sense? But if it doesn't make sense, this is a really good time to point it out and we can go over it again. or if you want to let it percolate, let me know. We'll come back to it.
I
So
have a
pausing,
question.
go ahead.
So I'm looking at, this is Eric Pooler. I'm looking at the measure index for the two quality measures for antipsychotics and UTI.
Yes.
And the performance data and the benchmark data period is 10/1/23 through 9/30/24. And when I look at the scorecard, you're using Q2/24 through Q1/25.
Okay. Great question. I'm going to pause on that one and pin it. And we'll go into that one next. Does anyone else have a question related to either of these, column C, and then we'll go into column D in just a second.
There is one, Brooke. It's just about the SharePoint requiring a login when people are clicking it off their scorecard.
Amanda, is that something you can address? That's not one I know about. And we might have to get back to you on that.
Yes, that hasn't been broadly distributed yet, but it will be very shortly. I expect in the next week. We were trying to resolve a couple of issues with any members of the SharePoint getting too many updates, basically, when activity is happening in there from other members. That's something we may not be able to completely resolve, so we'll be sharing it out soon, and we'll just have to take it as it comes.
Okay, so resolution coming soon to an inbox near you, probably. Okay. Anything else? So we have our performance data period. We also have a benchmark data period. So this kind of goes to what Eric, thank you so much for bringing this up, what Eric was saying about what you see on the scorecard itself. So let's go visit the scorecard and see if we can't find the information that corresponds with this performance data period for Q1 2025. And then we'll come back and figure out, well, how does that refer to the different quarters that you're seeing and the benchmark data period? So let's just find that information first. So we have the different measures. We can identify those immediately. They're still on the left-hand column under measure name. And if ever you do want to double check up here, your facility name and NPI +3 will be there. Good to always double check. We have an indicator. The down arrow, lower values are better. These are all called inverse measures. So you want a lower score, which is something that can be a little bit confusing if you're newer to quality measurement. But it means that you want fewer people having UTIs. You want fewer people to be taking unwarranted antipsychotic medications. You want less staff turnover. So that's something to keep in mind, is that lower values are better here. So here we do see the benchmarks, but right now we're looking for your Q1 performance. So I'm going to go over here to column E, and we see your facility performance for Q1 2025. Again, Q1 2025 being the period of time in the calendar year that we sent over your report, but the actual measurement that corresponds with the measures is over here in the measure index for the performance data period. So here we have the performance for antipsychotics 14.3, UTI for this example facility is 2.0, and then this one, nursing staff turnover, says not available. I wanted to use this one as an example because it came up in one of the questions in the inbox. If you're seeing that it's not available, something, and you're like, you know what, that doesn't really match what I'm expecting, your first step is to double check what is the performance data period, and then go into the data source. So what I did was open up the 226 file from the index link, and I have it ready for you so I could anonymize it. And I thought it was a little bit more ready. Let's do. So when we go to the source data, it's blank, it's not populated, and that's also what corresponds with Care Compare. So that's what we're reflecting. Again, one of our guiding priorities was to make sure that the data that we give you is in line with what you're already receiving. We don't want it to be new. We don't want it to be changed. We don't want you to have to keep track of a bunch of different measures and different interpretations of the measure. So the source data is exactly what you would see on Care Compare. I'm going to go back to the scorecard. So for nursing staff turnover, it says not available, it's not available. How this corresponds with payment and money, again, that will be something we talk about in the future. Let's just talk about the data here. Okay,
Hey, Brooke,
so yes, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. I think you said I should interrupt if you have a question,
Yeah.
though. So the data not being there, understandable for the reasons and everything. Is that unique to this individual facility, or is it
It-
across the board for whatever reason? Do we know why?
There are a couple, this was one that I might defer to Kathy on, but there are a couple flags that come up in the data about why data is not available. And I just can't remember off the top of my head, specifically for nursing staff turnover. But I think, Amanda, you look like you're going to say
I
something.
can take this one. Yeah. So this is based on PBJ reporting. So there are a handful of facilities in the state whose turnover is currently suppressed. That suppression does last for a few quarters, and that's typically based on either they missed a PBJ reporting file on time, or they had an audit, a PBJ audit that was unsuccessful. Generally, each facility knows why their particular data is suppressed, and they should be pretty aware of when it's going to come back online. And there's a lot of really good information in the 5-star preview reports when those come out of when that happened and when they can expect to see it again. Does that answer the question?
That's a great answer. Thank you. And I
Yeah.
understand the purpose of this call is to talk about the sheet in front of us. I'm of course thinking of the future as well, and as this relates to payment. So just for future reference, it'll be good to think about these scenarios and how facilities will be justly compensated when things like this happen.
Yes, definitely. There's not each of these things, and the turnover is probably the most prevalent one. It doesn't come without hiccups. There's always some data that CMS has their own, sometimes it's suppressed, sometimes it's missing, things like that. So yes, all things to consider.
And that is something that we have been taking into consideration. So thank you for making sure that that's on our radar. But other concerns, please do send our way. I'm going to jump back into the scorecard unless there are any other questions. So we have this Q1, again, the time of the year, of calendar year that we send it to you. This is your performance, and it's mirrored. Same thing down here. What we want to do, right? Let's go back to the purpose of this scorecard is to give you information that is in alignment with what you're seeing from CMS and Care Compare, hopefully internally. But you want to see how you're doing not only in this quarter, but also how you're doing in comparison to the benchmark period, which we're about to get into, and then also in comparison to your own previous performance. So we're looking at trends. We're looking at how you've been doing over the last year. And that takes me to this lower table. After we do this table, we'll go back to benchmarks. Eric, I haven't forgotten you. So we have Q1 down here mirrored from just above. And then again, these are all just the calendar year reports that would have been sent out if we were sending these out over the last 12 months. This is what your performance would have been on the reports had we sent them out during those different periods. So you can see how you're doing over time. I would say this is pretty stable. Again, lower is better for all of these measures. And this is great for just checking in to see, am I seeing any spikes? Am I seeing any dips? Am I seeing anything that would warrant checking in and maybe hiring someone to do like a quality improvement project or spending more time on like different QuEST calls? This is for your reference and internal use. So you have your information to see how you're doing, but also how you're doing in comparison to yourself over time. And then let's get to the benchmarks, how you're doing in comparison to the benchmarks. So the benchmarks or thresholds are referenced on the measure index, right? So if you have a question about what those are, always go back to the measure index. What was selected as your benchmark data period is exactly what is the data that you're receiving for Q1 2025. So column D is going to remain static. It's going to remain the same until further notice. It's going to be the same, I think we can confidently say, for a while. This is going to be what the comparison is. This is the benchmark. This is what we're seeing, how are you doing and what are we comparing to? It's exactly what you did Q1 2025. So let's talk about what the benchmarks are. there are 3 different columns that reflect the benchmarks. And this is the first time that when you do look at Care Compare, that you'll see something a little bit different. Here we have 20th percentile, national median, state median. When we go to Care Compare, they have national average and state average. So this is where we do change a little bit from Care Compare, but not on the type of measure, the interpretation of the measure, or your performance. So we have median rather than the mean. That's the 50th percentile rather than the average. And the minimum performance threshold is the national 20th percentile. This is what we take all the facilities nationally who are eligible for this measure, who are performing on this measure. It's the same data that you can pull from the measure index tab. You can even calculate it yourself if you want. Calculate the 20th percentile. Again, it's an inverse measure. So you're going to see higher numbers. We want to know that you are at least reaching the 20th percentile of all facilities nationally. So are you at least lower than 21% for antipsychotic medications? Are you at least lower than 3.3% for UTIs, than 60.6% for nursing staff turnover? And this, again, will remain static, right? Because it's this data period on the index page for the benchmark data. All of these benchmarks are going to remain static for a while. You don't have to worry about these changing. And if they do ever change, we're going to give you plenty of advance notice. So we want to know you're doing at least this well. Okay, let's talk about the high achiever threshold. So here it's a better than. So we want to know, are you doing better than whichever is more challenging, the national median or the state median? And again, because lower values are better, what we see is that nationally, these are the more challenging high achiever thresholds. So if your performance is less than 13.0, 1.2, 47.9, then you qualify for that high achiever qualification, which eventually will impact payment. We still want to keep the state median information in there. It keeps us, I think, clued into how the state is doing, and understanding kind of what kind of variability that we have between the state and nationally. But again, these will be static for a while, but they are subject to change in the future. Okay.
Brooke, there's another question in the Q&A that I don't think we've answered yet. What happens if the facility makes a modification to an MDS, which affects a particular QM after the scorecard is sent to the facility?
I want to get back to you on that specific question. I do have the answer in my head, but I want to reference what is going to be going out in policy to make sure that it's really shipshape when I give you that answer. Is that something that we can connect on? I don't see the Q&A right now on my screen, but can
Yeah, we can circle back to that. Yeah.
Brooke,
Okay.
we have a question in the chat. Andrea just wanted to know, so the benchmark period equals Q1 2025?
Yes, ma'am, or sir, or friend. And then that's just going to stay. So even if this becomes Q2 2025 right here, column E, this will remain Q1. When this is Q3, this remains Q1, etc.
Curious about the decision of the harder of the two for each one, looking to the future again a little bit. But do we know roughly, based on these current measures, hypothetically, how many facilities would be high achievers?
Oh my gosh, not off the top of my head, but that analysis, we ran an analysis when we were making these decisions back in like the policy making days, but then we're also doing another one in the future. We don't have that information ready right now though.
We
What
have
other questions?
We have another one in the chat. It says if the facility is below the minimum performance threshold, they get the incentive payment. And if they are below the high achiever threshold, they get the higher incentive payment.
Oh my gosh. So I believe so, except here's the thing. My brain is only wired for giving you the scorecard run through today. So we're going to hold on incentive payment questions for a future webinar or office hours. So please do send that through that email that Chelsea put in the chat, so we know that we can address that specifically in a future office hours.
I have a
the-
question.
Yeah, please.
I have a question. So I'm sorry. This is Tina from Borderview in Van Buren, Maine. My question is, these numbers are obtained, like it's the same numbers that I get when I process my Casper or I get my top line report, correct? Like the UTI, the nursing turnover, this data will match that data, correct?
Kathy and Amanda, can you speak to that?
It will, Tina, it will depend on the data period that you're looking at, right? So you're submitting information all the time. You should be able to
Okay.
find a historical record, but if it's not current right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to
Thank you.
look at that as
And the
well.
top line is usually a little bit delayed from
Okay.
NCA, HCA, NCAL, right? That one.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
but this all matches the CMS data.
Okay.
The Casper report is current and the American Healthcare Association top line is 1 quarter behind.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.
I wanted to take a moment, and I'm sure we have more questions, and I know more questions will come up, but I do want to take a moment to address the questions that came through via the email. We did address some of them, but I do want to just call them out in case you were one of the folks who did send them in. One asked, does QuEST go by fiscal year or by calendar year? What does Q1 2025 mean? I hope we covered that. But I think it might even be worth repeating. Q1 2025 refers to when we send you the report, but look at the index page to see what the actual data period reflects. Question 2, a facility had issues with their PBJ data because of a system-wide software change, so their numbers were lower than expected. Is that why there's no data available for staff turnover? Or is it because it had not been processed yet? And so that was the example that I showed you. The index page will show you the source data. And then, as Amanda said, that there are reasons for data suppression. Question 3, a facility has not coded anyone with the UTI for first quarter 2025, unsure where the information is coming from. And that, I think, is a really good opportunity to reflect on like the nomenclature. We're using Q1 2025 to mean something. If that is confusing and doesn't work moving forward, we need to have that feedback. But the data source, care compare, the inaccuracies, if you see any inaccuracies between the data source and what's on your report card, that should be reported to us. But if you see it an inaccuracy between the data source and your internal records, that's a CMS thing, right? We don't have control over that. Last question that came through the email was, a facility asked if for Q1 scorecard, are they compared to national or state median for the quality pool? And I think we just spoken to this, but it's the more stringent. So it's going to be the national median. And then we're not doing a quality pool in this first year of the program, but it would be the lesser value between the two. We just want to get used to the scorecards, be able to process the information this first year, but that was a great question. And then I think there's also something there about us being open to feedback. So is there a way that the information could be presented on the scorecards that would make more sense to you? All right, so those are all the questions that came in via email. What other questions do you folks have? Is there anything you want to go over again?
We have one more in the chat. Andrea said, will we be graded on improvement, comparison of the current to benchmark period, or achievement?
Achievement.
And anybody can feel free to just come off mute and ask your questions if you're comfortable doing that too.
If anyone wasn't sure what Andrea meant by that question, I'm happy to speak to that too. I feel like that question's like somebody cooked, you know what you're talking about. So the improvement, you can get credit for, I'm gonna share my screen again. So I believe what she was asking is something that we do in other value-based models, but not in this model. This model is about your achievement, facility performance against the benchmark. Some models give you credit for how you performed and if you're improving from previous periods. We're giving you the previous periods for your own records and reference. Sorry for the frog in my throat. But this for our payment pool is just for the achievement against the benchmark in the current period. What else? I'm having fun. Quality measures are great.
So
Hope you're
prior to the changes in the payment, that will be affected by whether you're a high achiever or versus not, the measures that you have in place now, will you be adding the rest of the quality measures to those, or are these like the nuts and bolts of what we are tracking for you?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And I wish I would have front-ended with that because this is the nuts and bolts of what we are tracking for you. So what we will add is core Q, and that is the patient experience, the resident experience survey.
Okay. Okay.
Like from the data source, like this is it. If we ever do change the measures, it would probably be in a while, and you also would have plenty of advance notice. It wouldn't be something that would just happen and be a surprise to you.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you mentioned this already, Brooke, so sorry if this is redundant. The UTI is for tracking purposes only, right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's for monitoring purposes only.
Monitoring, yeah.
Thank you, Amanda.
Quick question. I know that we still have to go through a court queue call like this, but some of us might want to start getting those satisfaction surveys up and running a little bit earlier than that seminar. And the question is, has anybody decided on what would be an acceptable vendor to use for that, or what would be the requirements? Would it be just as long as they use Core Q, foundation, or because there are, some of us, we'd like to maybe start it earlier than 2026, just to get into the groove and do feedback for ourselves. Has anybody picked like whether a vendor will be acceptable or not? How and what are the requirements for an acceptable vendor?
Great question. So that is a question to go through the email box for sure. And that's stuff that we've discussed internally and are going to be sharing with you. And I do like that you're asking that. I feel like, oh, if there's a high achiever threshold for wanting information, you've reached it. So make sure you send that through the inbox and then we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. But we're also sharing that through the Core Q webinar and office hours. And I want to support you getting started as soon as you can. So when it comes through the inbox, we'll be able to prioritize that.
Anne asked in the chat and she said, how often will the performance and benchmark periods change?
So the performance period updates every quarter. So I'm going to share my screen again. The benchmark period is going to remain the same for a while. So imagine the benchmark data period. So I'm on the scorecard. Down here on the measure tabs, measure index will give me this information. This benchmark data period is going to remain static for a while. Let's just assume it's not going to change. Okay. This performance data period is going to update every quarter. So once this becomes Q2 2025 and you get this report in like June, this is going to float forward a few months. So it's probably going to be, I think, like 10/1/23 to 9/30, 30 days half September. Yeah, 9/30/24. And these will float forward 3 months as well. But the benchmark data period will remain the same. It will still be 7/1 to 6/30 and 10/1 to 9/30. Does that make sense?
What other questions do you all have? Or maybe there was one that was already asked that you want some more clarification on?
Well, I think, Amanda, some of us are waiting to know what the financial impact will be of the scorecard, when it will be paid, when will be the decision made whether you're a high achiever, low achiever, did not meet the. I think those are questions that are going to be, people are going to need the answers to as they progress down the road here, especially for their financial people who don't have a clue about this as much as they should, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Peter. Our thought with getting the scorecard out, following the first quarter of this year is to give everybody kind of a jump start into what their performance is right now, what the benchmarks for comparison will be. Of course, this year it's participation only. So making sure that you show up, for the QuEST calls and other activities as outlined in the rule. And then this is kind of a preparation period. And I know your data goes back, further than this year, but it gives you time to kind of try to mold it and to kind of get that performance where you want it to be for next year when it does, kick into affecting payments. So yeah, understood.
And if I may, I think the purpose of doing an office hours just on the scorecard is kind of the equivalent of like, let's learn the alphabet before we write a book. I want to make sure that you can navigate this scorecard before putting payment into it, because that adds a level of complexity. Value-based payment and value-based purchasing there's a threshold there, like there's a hurdle there for understanding, and we want to make sure that we are leading you into it in a way that makes sense. So that is something that we're going to be covering. We don't want to keep it a secret from you. Full transparency is one of like our values. So that is something that we will be covering in the future. I do see a question that came through. Most of our changes, well, it's a comment, we make now will not be shown until maybe Q3. That's consistent, unfortunately, with a lot of just how healthcare data works. There's going to be a lag, and we really try to navigate what can we do to make it so changes are reflected as soon as possible. And there was a comparison between like, well, what can we do to make something fast versus what is consistent with like CMS and Care Compare. And so ultimately, this is just the shortest lag that we could accommodate.
I'm not sure if we answered the one from Eric about what happens when a facility makes a modification to an MDS.
That's one that I said that I would love to go back to. So if we can just like get his information.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
On the same vein of the scorecard, are there going to be consideration of training via QuEST on the other quality measures, maybe to help educate people, as because not all of them are obviously going to be used, but we use them in our facility for trying to improve the quality of the care that we deliver. Is QuEST going to consider some training on those and how to look at those and understand them better, because they are not exactly an easy thing to understand sometimes, especially when you get into outliers of residents who somehow manage to skew the data a little bit. Just the thought that might be something of value in the pursuit of doing quality is, again, if new people come into this system long-term care all the time, they may not have historical knowledge of how those all work and how they work and how they're measured. Because again, you're pulling your data from CMS's quality measures. It is important that they have that founding principle of how to understand them well. And maybe a reference to how those are measured, where the data is pulled from for those on a QuEST website, or even a session for that.
Peter, are you asking about the quality measures, like other quality measures on the MDS? Like,
yeah.
Okay, but not the UTI and antipsychotic?
No. Well, I mean, again, I think the problem is you have lots of new people who come in, and the quality, the value, the scorecard measures two of those quality measures. if the goal here is to improve quality of care as a whole, understanding how the quality measures work. I mean, I always score incredibly high in new and worsening bowel and bladder simply because of the way it is it's scored. And so again, again, we understand that we've done everything we can in order to improve that quality measure. But to understand that quality measure and what it means in relation to, you can do everything right and still end up on a high end side. And I think that basic education of quality measures as part of the quest for quality here is something that as new people come into this system over and over, as the faces have changed in my 30 plus years, that's something that sometimes doesn't get addressed or educated enough on for people to understand, including also the ones, the value-based purchasing for, the federal short-term stay ones too, as well, might be helpful in the pursuit of overall quality to help those people improve their numbers as well in areas that are not payment related. Just saying.
Peter, I think I understand what you're saying. Basically understanding the test to take the test, right? And yes, right. Of the whole 5-star, yes, I think the quality measures are complex, for sure. I've made a note of that. Each of the three, legs, so to speak, of QuEST are kind of designed to support each of the three quality measures. Of course, the Dementia Care Partnership really supports decreasing your antipsychotic use in your resident population, specifically with dementia, but others as well. I think, and Maureen Carlin would be a better one to ask on that, but I do think that one of the topics that they go into at some point is how that particular quality measure works. But I've made a note of your suggestion too, because you're right, those are complex, especially for newcomers. And it is important to understand as you're inputting the data, and you can kind of track and see, like, for instance, I think you maybe said catheter, like, oh, well, that catheter is, it drives your clinical decision-making sometimes too, to know that that's inappropriate and that's why we're getting tagged for it. So let's talk to the doc and see if we should do something about that. I've made a note, and we can certainly collaborate with Maine Healthcare Association to consider what we can come up with to support with that.
So I have another question. Sorry. What if, let's say, we are high achiever on 2 of these 3, and we're better than the minimum performance threshold? How will that affect? Because you're not all 3 in the higher achiever.
Great question.
Like, what if
shows me that we are probably ready to, like this, that means that you understand the scorecard, which is one of the goals of the meeting today, the office hours today. But that question is definitely something we're going to address when it comes to how does this impact payment. Do you have?
Okay, thank you.
Perfect question. Thanks, and thanks for asking it, so I know that you understand the scorecard. What else?
Sorry, another future-oriented question, perhaps without a full answer today, but it would be great if we at some point know what the timeline is in terms of year 2 of rate reform, the decisions here, opportunity for input on certain thresholds and everything else. Whenever that timeline's available, the sooner the better. And that's just a general request.
And any other feedback or requests, we love to hear it. So either now or through that general inbox would be great. Should we drop the email one more time so folks know where to communicate?
Yep, I think that's a good idea. Thank you so much, Chelsea. No question is a bad question. We really appreciate everybody's thoughtful input and giving us questions to give us an opportunity to explain a little bit more. Is there anything that we discussed today that maybe you want to revisit, get more clarification on? Of course, if something does come up that, just kind of sparks in your head tomorrow or tonight or something like that, that inbox is a perfect place for it. And we can be mindful of those questions as we're kind of preparing for the next training in office hours in relation to this.
So just to summarize, so I know I understand this. Basically, we're learning about the scorecard now. We're learning what measures are going to be on it because the things that we do during this year, 2025, will be what affects the payment when you start in 2026.
I think that's a fair way of saying it. I think we're learning about it. Yes. So you are able to orient yourself to the whole process. Yeah, that's fair.
Because now's the time. If the data that's going to affect payment is going to be from this year. Right? Because it looks like the scorecard I'm looking at that you sent in Q1, the performance data and the benchmark data look like they're from the previous year, 2023, 2024. So 2024, 2025 data is what's going to come on this scorecard starting like
Yeah,
in
I see.
January, right? Because we're not going to be, when you send out the benchmark, the report, let's say the scorecard Q1 2026, for example, the performance data period and the benchmark period will not be what it is right now on my scorecard. It's going to be adjusted, correct?
Yes. Okay. So part of the reason we include the historic performance, your trended performance, is so you can keep track of how you've been doing over time, right? And maybe also predict how you might be doing in the future. Because there's no way, like you can try your hardest, but the data is only as good as it is, and you can predict what you can. Improvement takes time. So we are going through the different like the QuEST webinars to help in improvement. From the perspective of a payer, right? It's like, well, we do try to educate and we are trying to aid in improvement, right? Our priority is making sure you are supported and that the residents are taken care of. But we also do want to put some of the onus on the facilities to make sure that you're also improving on these measures internally, right? So that improvement would start now, but maybe it's not reflected until a few months. Maybe it's not reflected until a couple of years, depending on like what your quality improvement methods are.
Okay.
Does that kind of cover what, like, are we reflecting?
Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Just to reiterate one more time too, because I think you asked this too, Tina, but just to reiterate, that benchmark period will remain the same for the foreseeable future. So when and if that benchmark changes someday in the very distant future, it would, you know, I presume, but you'll get notice before those benchmark numbers change. So that you'll know in the future what you're comparing yourself against, as opposed to in real time when you don't know how the rest of the country is doing. You know, you're trying to figure out how you're doing. So the benchmark will remain static so that you'll have something to stable to compare against.
Thank you, Amanda.
And
Great.
Brooke, if I could just add too, one of the other reasons for sharing this performance card in advance is so you can give us some feedback, right? On is it readable? Do I understand it? What might improve it? Anything like that would be really helpful to hear too. And can obviously send that in via email, etc. So thanks. Yeah.
Like we have an email.
Yeah, thanks for reiterating that, Kathy, because that is important. It's all, it's a process, right? Anything to do with quality improvement or measuring, it's a process. So anything that we can do to help with that, to make it a little bit more manageable. Any final thoughts or questions? Kathy or Brooke, any final thoughts or questions, from either of you?
I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up today, and we had a pretty good turnout and folks stayed. I fully was anticipating office hours to be poorly attended, and This is a great group, and I'm really loving this work. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, I think we mentioned at the top of the call, we did record today's call, so we will be distributing it to everybody that's on the QuEST email group. I believe everybody in here is on that group. If you want to be added to that, just send an email to that and a member of the team can put you right on it for any future communications. And any questions like we mentioned that pop up, again, send it to that email. Other than that, we expect that recording will go out by Monday, but we're hoping for sooner, just so you have a little bit of a timeline. And with that, I thank you all. Have a great day. Thanks for coming.